Hi there. My name's Dave, and I really enjoy wine. I like drinking it, I like tasting it, and I enjoy talking about it as well as I'm doing right now. Today's wine is a Curatolo Arini Grillo wine from Sicily. And let's start off by giving a little background on Sicily. Sicily's been making wines since 4000 BC, so they kind of know what they've been doing all this time. Why have they been making wines there? Well, the climate is dry, it's warm, and there is moderate rainfall. The conditions are dry, and that means there's less chance of rot or mildew. And also that means that it's easier to make organic wine, which is what last week's Grillo was. In my research, I looked at several different websites, and here's some interesting information about Grillo. Wine Folly, one of my favorite websites, says, think of Grillo as a fuller, funky alternative to Pinot Grigio. With that slight herbal note and bright acidity, all seafood, vegetable dishes, and pastas will do well. So that's a nice introduction. Wine Enthusiast also has a lot of information about Grillo, and it says that Grillo is a crisp and savory wine. Some are structured enough to offer moderate aging potential, which I didn't think of. I sort of think it's a simple wine. The lighter styles are reminiscent of Sauvignon Blanc, and the vineyards closest to the sea produce wines with salinity or saltiness in them. Now, last week's and this week's Grillo are not from the sea at all. They're quite inland and range from about 400 to 600 meters above sea level. Grillo is a crossing of Catarato and Moscato di Alessandria, or Zebibo grapes. And the actual grape was nearly abandoned in the 1960s. It was used to make Marcella, which is a fortified wine, but then was almost abandoned. And then in 1990, though, this legendary Marcella producer by the name of Marco di Bartoli decided to use Grillo on its own as a dry white wine, and the rest is history. Renato di Bartolo, who is Marco's son, says it thrives in the heat and doesn't become cooked and jammy as do some international grapes. It's fresh and easy drinking, but with a savory note that gives it a distinctly Sicilian personality. Now, not everyone likes Grillo, or not everyone has enjoyed it. One of my other podcasts that I like to listen to is called Wine for Normal People. And Elizabeth, the host of that, says, I've heard that Grillo can make decent wines similar to full-flavored tropical Chardonnay, but I can only judge based on the one I tried. It was outstanding in one way. It was maybe the lamest, most boring wine I've had in months. And in my odyssey of exploring more Italian wines, this is a profound fail. But the last website I went to, Testimony of a Wine Junkie, had some very interesting information on Grillo as well. Some wines have a lovely freshness, fruitiness, stunning acidity and finish with some saltiness, while some wines have fruit that is sweeter with tropical fruits and is reminiscent of a Sauvignon Blanc. So it's the second time we've heard Sauvignon Blanc. There are two versions of the actual Grillo grape, or two clones, I guess, and they're usually blended together. One is more citric and acidic, and the other is sweeter and more tropical. Also, the grapes grown on the coast taste differently than the grapes grown inland. According to my information, the grapes grown on the coast are supposed to be better. Interestingly, both the Grillo wine we tried last week and today's Grillo wines were both grown inland. So the actual wine this week is a Curatolo Arini 1875 winery wine, and the winery surprisingly started in 1875. The winery is famous for Marcella fortified wine, and it started making table wine, which would be a blend of grapes, I assume, in the 1970s. But in the 1990s, started making single varietal wines, including Grillo. This Grillo is grown in western Sicily, not far from last week's Grillo, at 500 meters above sea level. After being picked, the wine was destemmed, and there was some maceration for a few hours before being fermented in steel tanks. Then it was left on the leaves for 60 days. That means it's left on the dead yeast cells, and that gives it sort of a buttery, creamy, cheesy taste to it. It's supposed to pair well with seafood, olives, and spicy foods. Now, this wine is $24. The last week's wine was $17. So here's a question. Is this wine worth the $7 more than last week's wine? And that's what we're going to find out today as it's time to taste. Okay, let's do this. Ooh. Appearance, clear, pale lemon, almost pale. Nose, lemon, it was a clean nose. Lemon, pineapple, got a bit of tropical fruit, maybe nectarine, and once you mentioned it, grapefruit. I could smell the grapefruit too. I also got some sort of like bready or pastry kind of smell, like a sort of a bready, just a whiff, more like pastry. Like, you know, when you open up a Costco thing of pastry, you get a whiff of that sort of bread and icing smell. And then a bit of butter or cream, sort of a creaminess, sort of a creamy smell. And then, those are ones for sure. You're looking at me quizzically. And then I also, these are my maybes, maybe grass or eucalyptus. Sort of, I felt that there's something herbal there, and I really couldn't put my finger on it, couldn't put my nostril on it. So, well, shall we do some tasting?
Yeah.
Like I felt it was dry, medium. I thought medium plus acidity, medium alcohol, and it's 12.5%. So we're both right on with the medium alcohol. I said medium minus body, a medium plus flavor intensity at about a medium finish. I said lemon, grapefruit, lime, and nectarine. So similar. Maybe a little bit of cream in there. There's something else there that's providing that roundness. That bit of roundness. I still found even with that, I still found it a little bit astringent or maybe a little bit acidic for me. I'm not sure if it's astringent or acidic. It's fairly, like, it's funny because I did some reading and they talk about how some of them are kind of like Pinot Grigio or Pinot Gris, and some of the Grillo is like Sauvignon Blanc, and this one's more like a Sauvignon Blanc to me, right? So in that sort of citrusy, you know, New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc kind of way. I mean, it's not exactly one, but it's reminiscent of it. I thought it was balance was okay. I still, like I said, I thought it was a little acidic. The length was okay. Like it was for about 30 seconds before it sort of declined. Intense, yep, nice intense flavors, and it wasn't over complex. I felt this was a fairly simple wine. I rated it as good. I rated it as a good wine. I actually liked the one. Last week, I rated it between good and very good. So I like this one, but not as much as last week's. And so if I were to choose between the two, between this week's and last week's, I would have chosen last week's because I thought that was...
I think so.
Because, especially, forget the price, just I think the wine is better. And then when you put the price into it, this is fine, right? But
yeah,
it's not as good as last week's. If you are going to be in the Okanagan this summer, and would like a wine tour of the region, which is customizable, flexible, and completely private in the comfort of your own vehicle, please follow the link down below where the arrow is pointing in the comments.